Congressman Byron Donalds from House Oversight and House Budget, and from the Washington Examiner's Byron York. First to you, Congressman. It's good to have you both on, by the way. It's great to say. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. It's good to see you. Now, Congressman, it's good to see you. Congressman, Trump's influence coming in strong. Politicos say former President Trump has endorsed more than 42 candidates in recent primaries. So this is a tug of war between the January 6 hearings and you know, the attacks on Trump because of what his behavior during the Capitol riots, but also the performance of the U.S. economy under President Biden. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, the Republican voters across the country still follow and still listen to a lot of what Donald Trump says and what his opinions are. And the truth is, regardless of Politico or anybody in the main media, he has been right. He picks candidates who are about putting Americans first, putting our country first, and Republican voters have responded to those selections, to those choices by President Trump. And then the vast majority of races, they're following suit.
What do you think, Byron, to what given what the congressman is saying? By the way, polls are mixed. Morning Consult Politico polls suggest the January 6 hearings hurt Trump with independents. But then you have USA Today and the Suffolk University poll showing the hearings have not changed voters' minds. How is this all going to play out? What do you think?
Well, I think you have to separate 2022 and 2024. There's no doubt that the goal of the January 6th committee is to somehow disqualify Donald Trump from running for president and being elected president in 2024. There's absolutely no doubt that's their goal. But this is 2022. And is that rubbing off on Republicans? First of all, as you said, Trump is showing a pretty solid influence with Republican voters with many, not all, many of his endorsements. But things still look very, very good for Republicans to take over the House. That's not something I think voters are going to say, wow, look at what the January 6th committee, I think, said. I think it will affect my vote for the House. Probably not going to happen.
Interesting what Byron York just said, Congressman. You know, the Republicans behind the scenes are saying, you know, those 3 hours where Trump didn't act, right? And then there was talk about hanging Mike Pence, that's damaging to Trump. Where do you come down on that?
Well, look, I think a couple of things. One, I don't think that was the best thing from the president. I was on the floor during January 6th. It was a terrible time for the country. But you got to take a step back and understand the more important picture. Americans are struggling under the Democrat agenda. And let's be very clear, this is not just Joe Biden. This is also Nancy Pelosi. It's also Chuck Schumer. It's also Bernie Sanders. This is the complete congressional Democrat agenda that the American people are being faced with, and they are going to reject it because it's hurting everybody.
Yeah,
and I think regardless of what the opinions are on January 6th, that's the thing that's going to motivate the American people this November and going forward.
And Byron, given what the congressman just said, we've seen Quinnipiac, Monmouth polls, Emerson polls. We've seen Pew Research. These are nonpartisan polls. They're saying the congressman is correct that voters are really angry about inflation. They're angry about the attacks on U.S. energy. They're angry about crime. They're angry about inflation. They're angry about the collapse of the border. All of that went into reverse when President Biden took office. That's what we're hearing from voters. What do you say?
Well, all of the polls show us that, for example, for inflation, everybody says it's their top concern going into 2022. And of course it is. I mean, all you have to do is go to the grocery store or the gas station to see that. So there's no doubt that that is the most important issue. And also, let's not forget history here, which is that the party in power in the president's first midterm generally loses a lot of seats. And if the president has a job approval rating above 50%, usually they lose a dozen, maybe 14 seats. If he has a job rating below 50%, they lose over 35 seats. Joe Biden is in the mid-30s now. That is a terrible outlook for Democrats.
Let's watch top Democrats Jerry Nadler, Carolyn Maloney, and Senator Joe Manchin. They're refusing to show their support for President Biden's re-election. Carolyn Maloney even says she doesn't think he's running. Watch.
Should President Biden run again in 2024?
Too early to say. It doesn't serve the purpose of the Democratic Party to deal with that until after the midterms.
Ms. Maloney.
I don't believe he's running for re-election.
Would you support Joe Biden if he's on the ticket in 2024 as the Democratic president
Andrea,
seeking re-election.
Let me make it very, very clear. This is one of the most important pieces of legislation in my lifetime that we've ever done, to have energy security, to fight inflation, to help our geopolitical allies around the world.
And you've worked with the Democratic White House on it.
And that's exactly, and I'm working with it. I'm very appreciative. They are. But for me to bring the politics into it, oh, this is a Democrat bill. Oh, this is an anti-Republican bill. This is not. I'm not talking about the 2022 election and 2024.
You're a Democratic senator. I'm just asking you whether you would support the leader of your own party.
Wow, they won't even talk about it. You know, Tim Ryan, Cori Bush, they won't endorse them. Congressman, from where you sit, why are Democrats really backing away from Biden? We know his polls are bad. We know recessions delivered one-term presidencies for Ford, Carter, and George H.W. Bush. From where you sit, what do you say?
They're backing away from Joe Biden because he's terrible at his job, and he's not a leader, and he's not even good at motivating the American people, and he's followed the congressional Democrat agenda lock, stock, and barrel, and it's been a complete failure. They'd rather just dump him and move to somebody else, but they don't want to change the agenda. He's very bad at this. The voters are not being supportive of him. He can't even go out and rally people to his side. So why have him there? That's why they're not supporting him. That's why they're not seeking his endorsement. It's very, very clear. But remember this thing. It's not just Joe Biden. It's also the congressional Democrats, because this is their agenda.
Byron, New York, your final word.
Well, we also had another couple of Democrats from Minnesota, Dean Phillips and Angie Craig, said they definitely do not want Biden to run. These members of Congress
so who do they want?
AOC?
AOC? But who do they want? AOC, Gavin Newsom? Who do they want?
You look at all the polls, voters want somebody else.
Okay.
There's no particular person they've agreed upon. Look at the polls in the past 6 months. In the New York Times Siena polls, 64% of Democrats said they wanted somebody else as the nominee.
Got it.
CNN poll, 75%. These members of Congress have found that it is safe now to come out and say Joe Biden shouldn't run.
Wow, it's wild times we're in. It's good to have you both on to break it down. Thanks for joining.